I've been riding Harleys all my whole life. The bikes in this movie were romantic for me because these shovel heads that they show, right in the scene there, with the big buddy seat and all that kind of stuff. That's what I had.
You have to accept the fact that you cannot fix another person. Only that person can fix themselves. The story of Johnny sort of reminds me of a sort of bigger issue that we're having here in the United States, which is that there's a big loneliness epidemic for young men, and that there's a big disillusionment with how men fit into society now.
You're your own hero. You're the king. You're going to go out and conquer the world when you leave the house in the morning. And you're doing it for that goddess that's waiting at home, and not waiting. She's living her life, but she knows that she is the prize. And he knows that he's the prize. And together they're thrilled to have each other that way. That's the way you want to be.
Hi, welcome to The Real Generation Gap. I'm BJ King.
And I am Geezer Glide Fred.
And the movie we're reviewing today is the 2023 film The Bikeriders, Bikesploitation. In 1960s Chicago, a local group of outsiders and misfits form a motorcycle club, but watch as it falls apart as the group is consumed by crime and degeneracy.
Okay, well, before we get into the bikesploitation, why is this a 2023 film? Isn't it 2024 now?
It previewed last year, I believe, but it wasn't released for wide release until this year.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that's kind of confusing for me.
A little bit, but I saw it.
But I created the bikesploitation idea because this movie, you could have taken the motorcycles out of it and just had a mafia movie, and everything that would have happened in a mafia movie, it would have been the same story. The group of people get together, they do some stuff together, they got the girl who's, the mafia wife, and, they have conflict among themselves, and then it breaks up when it gets... So this is kind of like, this script for this thing, there was no bikes in the movie. Even though they were riding on them, there was no real bike part. If they had some really good racing moments or some really good cross-country moments, like if the guys went out on the highway and, they were born to be wild and, they're, traveling across the Rockies or something like that. But none of that happened. It was all just personal relationships between people. It was a real study of a family, a group of people that got together as a family and disintegrated when there was different ideas about how to run the family.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I was real disappointed. I wanted a motorcycle movie. I am a motorcyclist. I've been riding Harleys all my whole life. The bikes in this movie were romantic for me because these shovel heads that they show, right in the scene there, with the big buddy seat and all that kind of stuff. That's what I had. I had those bikes from the 60s. Most of the bikes I had were shovel heads. I had a few Evos, now a few twin cams. So it was kind of reminiscent, but they didn't really show those bikes. So in that regard, I didn't dig it.
It's interesting that you say it felt a lot like a mafia movie. I was actually talking to Rudy the other day about what he thought. And he said that the filmmaking was a lot like a Martin Scorsese film. And, honestly, I began to see it. The movie is told very much in a fashion that reminded me a lot of The Irishman. A lot
right.
of that sort of, you're being retold the accounts from different perspectives. And a lot of the editing and the styling, it made it seem a lot like it took inspiration from, like you said, Martin Scorsese. And the one I drew most to was The Irishman. And it did feel a lot like a mafia movie. So it's really interesting that you say that, just take away the motorcycles, it's just a mafia movie.
The same script, right?
It's about a group.
I mean, if they had put Robert De Niro in there or Joe Pesci, forget it, right?
Yeah.
It would have just been Goodfellas.
The thing that I I found myself really admiring the most about this movie was the costume design. I was really, I have a bomber jacket myself. I should have brought it with me. I have a good couple patches on it, and I was real interested into the sort of hardcore punk rock culture. And so patches and leather jackets were
I totally don't picture you that. That's so funny to hear that.
yeah, but patches and leather jackets were things that I was very familiar with, and so I couldn't help but just admire the all the patches and the jackets and the style that they have. I mean, Norman Reedus's I believe his motorcycle jacket stood out the most to me, and I was really in love with as well as like the motorcycles as well. And I just had to ask, is like, I mean, were these motorcycles accurate? Did they do their homework on this movie?
Yeah, the motorcycles were correct, and there's plenty of that kind of bike wear. And you see me wearing that every time I come here, right? I had the leather. Today it's the denim jacket. Usually the winter it was the leather jacket. And I've gone through many, and I've had all kind of, classic styles and every different thing like that. But right now, you mentioned Norman Reedus.
Yeah.
His character. And I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Northern Exposure.
I have not.
But in there was a guy named Ed Kachigliak, and he was played by a guy named Darren E. Burroughs. And when I saw Norman Reedus in the movie, it was him. It was Ed. It was like, oh, I know who that is. He's grown up now. Because he played like an 18-year-old in the TV show that was
really?
maybe 30 years ago, right? Northern Exposure. Took as a TV show that took place in Alaska.
Norman Reedus is now most famous for his role on the Walking Dead TV series. I watched like all the way till season 5, I believe. And in that one, he plays a biker as well. It's very funny for them to have...
But Ed Kachigliak in Northern Exposure wears the biker jacket. It's called the Original Skin, an original skin, like kind of a play on Original Sin, right?
Yeah.
And he wears that because he has that like persona. He's really a Native American in Alaska, and he's got the biker jacket, right? So when I saw Norman Reedus, he looked, and not only does he look like him, but he sounds just like him. I was convinced that it was Darren Burroughs. And I said, like, wow, look at Darren Burroughs. Look at him now. He's still wearing the same jacket, just like on Northern Exposure. And it was into the end of the credits. I was like, why didn't he get a credit? And I really, until I got home and searched that out, did I find out, like, no, that wasn't him. But boy, does he look like him and sound like him.
I'll have to check him out.
Yeah, it's just a funny thing. I don't know if any of you out there, watched Northern Exposure, or you could binge watch it on YouTube, I guess. Terrific TV show.
Yeah, I mean, Norman Reedus is very experienced with playing very grizzled, very rough around the edges. I mean, he did all The Walking Dead playing Daryl Dixon, who was this redneck biker who was hardened by the zombie apocalypse, obviously. And so it was honestly, it was a perfect casting decision for Norman Reedus.
And you know how that can be when there's a zombie apocalypse. The animal in you comes out, right?
You either get hard or you get eaten.
Every time. So I'm proud to still be here.
Yeah. And so Norman Reedus was just like, he wasn't exactly the most in-depth character, but he was a very cool romanticization of this wild motorcycle man. I mean, when he rides in with that hair and and the teeth.
Right. Yeah.
And the teeth and the motor.
They didn't really have meth mouth back then.
Yeah.
There wasn't meth yet. It was all crank then.
Yeah.
And it was funny because my brother said, oh yeah, they had that biker crank. And I was like, I always thought of that as trucker crank. Like the truck drivers, they didn't have the laws then. You could drive 24 hours. Truck drivers were falling asleep and driving off cliffs and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they created laws to rein that in a little bit.
It's funny that you said, now this is the part where it kind of connects to what I felt mostly about the movie, is that you said it felt to you like a character study. To me, the story was very like, there's a gang, it's a tight-knit group of people, then, they bring in some undesirables, and then the gang starts to fall apart. Very, you like I said, watch a mafia movie, you'll get it. And then even the character study did not feel very character driven. It felt a little like, because it felt like it was about Austin Butler's character, but then it felt, which is Benny, and then it felt more like it was about Johnny, but then also it felt more
it was
about
Benny, Johnny, and Kathy.
Yeah, and then Kathy, right?
Yeah.
But even then, it felt very much like it was a big split between their characters, and it felt much less like it was about the story, much less it was about the characters, but more it was just about the overall culture and vibe, as well as like, sort of the romanticization of the early biker culture and the post-war biker culture in the United States.
The post-war biker culture that you're talking about, a lot of it had to do with people who came back from the war, mm-hmm. and they had PTSD, and they needed to be out of society, and they needed a lot of dangerous action because they were in firefights, a month ago, and now they're back here in sunny California, and they don't want to become a shoe salesman. They got to get out in nature. They've been out in nature. They've been in country in combat, right over in France or Italy or someplace, and they had a lot of them brought these British bikes back, and a lot of the beginning bikers had British. There's a lot of Triumphs, Bonnevilles and stuff like that back then. It wasn't all Harley the way you think of it. In this movie, it was pure Harley, and a lot of groups had, they were kind of pure Harley, but this movie had no choppers in it.
There was that the kid who ends up taking over the gang later. I won't spoil how, but so he brings in a chopper. He says he brought in a. Perhaps you're not speaking specifically. He said his bike was chopped together. I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with motorcycles.
No, there was nothing by Sugar Bear in this movie. You know what I mean? There was nothing like that. There wasn't one extended front end. In the 60s, that was happening in a big way, right? These guys didn't show any love for their bikes. And a lot of bikers, the bike is, like there was a classic in Easy Rider magazine. There was a couple that was getting married. And there was the motorcycle, and they're standing in front of the motorcycle, and then in the comment section, it was like, why are they standing in front of the motorcycle? They should be standing behind it, Yeah. And there was a lot of that kind of sentiment, and this movie had none of that. There was really no biker stuff, There was no on-the-road riding. It just wasn't a biker movie.
Really?
It was basically a movie about those three people.
It was like a mafia movie, just throwing some bikes for flavor.
And the lead character, Benny, the guy right in the picture there, handsome young man, his whole thing in life was he didn't want anything from anybody, and he didn't want anybody to ask anything of him. He just wanted to exist monolithically and separately. So here's a guy who wanted to be monolithically alone, but you can't. And he had to return to Kathy, and he had to return to the club, and he had an emotional breakdown, and he cried, right? Now, the guy who started the club, that was...
Johnny.
Right, I'm sorry, yeah. So he was a guy who, for some reason, he wanted to create a club. He wanted to kind of have a patch, right?
Yeah.
There was no real value in it, but he wanted to create this family. Now, early on in the movie, he meets the girl, and the girl is repulsed by the gang because they're, crude slobs.
Yeah.
They're drinking and puking, right? And she wants to get out of there, but she's seduced by the very handsome Benny.
Yeah.
Right, and he gives her a ride home, and he treats her like a lady. He says, "You're not in any danger. I'm here. I'm going to take you safely home, and you don't have to worry about these guys." And she's seduced by that because there are those girls who want the bad boy, but the problem with the bad boy is he's a bad boy, and he's going to be a bad boy, and you can't change him. Now she says she goes to Johnny.
You can't have him.
If he wants to ride a bike.
And she says, you want him to be the leader of the club. You want him in the club. I want him at home with me. I want him to be my husband, my man, right? And we're having a battle over him. But he doesn't want either one of them.
Yeah.
He's out. He doesn't care. So he marries her, but he's got his own terms. He's not a letter carrier. He's not going to come home at 6 o'clock. He's not in the union. You know what I mean? He's not that guy. She wants to make him into that guy. So I thought about it. That's always a failure. That's always a bad thing. If you fall in love with a champion athlete or a rock star and that person is sleeping around and he's got 1 million fans or whatever, you can marry that guy, but you got to marry that guy. You're marrying that guy. You're not going to marry that guy and then make him into a different guy.
Yeah.
Right? So I thought, who philosophically expressed this the best? And of course, I came up with Peter Criss, who you realize is the drummer in Kiss. and they had a hit song called Beth.
Okay.
And it's a real simple song. I always love it when a drummer writes a song. And I put the lyrics here. I don't even need to read them all. There's just 3 little verses. It says, Beth, I hear you calling, but I can't come home right now. Me and the boys are playing, and we just can't find the sound. So it's the band. He's the drummer, right?
Yeah.
Then he says, you say you feel so, look, they got a typo. It says fell so empty. You say you feel so empty that our house just ain't a home. I'm always somewhere else, and you're always there alone. Then the last thing is, Beth, I know you're lonely, and I hope you'll be all right, because me and the boys will be playing all night. And that's what happens. Johnny's got the same problem. He wants to relinquish his control to the younger man. Younger man doesn't want to he doesn't want to run this thing. He doesn't want to run it. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to wear the patch, and he'll wear the patch till death. He's loyal till death.
His colors, yeah.
But you know why they call it colors? You know about that?
Not too much, no.
It was invented by the Scots. And the Scots, each Scottish clan, I actually call it a cut, but each Scottish clan had a separate plaid. And they would create the kilt in that plaid so that when you got killed on the battlefield or injured on the battlefield, they would know who to take you home to. Mm-hmm. So they say, that guy's a McTavish. Mm-hmm. The McTavish clan lives here. We'll take him to so he can be buried or be whatever it may be. And that's where colors, each of these Highlanders, they had their colors. Mm-hmm. They were their clan colors. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was in the movie, the guy is not with the club. He's off somewhere else. But yet Kathy, is hanging out with the club. And these guys, there's a misunderstanding and they assault her. And she says, fortunately, another club member bails her out before she's gang raped. But she says to Benny, this happened to me and you weren't there. You weren't there. Oh. Well, what the hell was she doing there? She had no business being there without him. She's his old lady. He's the club member.
She went to that with Benny though, you know, and she would expect that Benny, be by her side.
Yeah, well, don't expect that because the guy is not that guy. So. Yeah, if you're going to be with brutal, rude people, brutal, rude things might happen to you, and you shouldn't be there. There was a lady in there, the Vietnamese girl. Well, see, there she is down there, right, Gail?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a hard woman. She's, nobody messes with her, at least in the movie, right? So she's somebody who can, but Kathy is not like that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about with these old ladies is they are guilty. And when you are a mafia wife, you are driving the Cadillac. Your husband's killing people, right? He's runs a whorehouse or a drug business or some horrible thing, and you're benefiting. You're living in the house. You're driving the car. You know what your husband's doing. You are equally guilty of his crimes because you're living the good life on his crimes. Women know what their men do. Women are not stupid. You can't be immune from prosecution for living the fat lifestyle that crime provided. If crime is providing your lifestyle, you are responsible for the crime. You could walk away. You could say, you know something, you're a criminal, you're killing people, you're selling drugs to children, whatever you're doing. I can't be a part of that. I gotta go. So I wanted to bring that philosophical point up.
My girlfriend kind of had that point. She likes to view movies from she's very passionate about viewing movies from a sort of feminist lens, if possible, seeing how that fits, like what kind of messages does it send towards women when they watch these movies. And she finds that one of the biggest trends in romance movies is that a woman gets with this guy and she thinks that she can fix him, and then she finds out slowly that she cannot fix him. And then he finally becomes vulnerable, or he breaks down or something like that, and all of a sudden that absolves all of what he's done, and then she accepts him back. But essentially that just sells this narrative towards women that, you know, these men cannot be fixed, but that doesn't necessarily make them men that you shouldn't be with. And it's like, no, they're 100% men that you should not be with, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, either you are, I suppose I see a little bit of your side. Either you are complicit, either you are accepting, you have to accept the fact that you cannot fix another person. Only that person can fix themselves. And either this movie is trying to sell that, you know, women can be happy with men that they cannot fix, or that men are perfectly fine not having to fix themselves, because if they're cool enough, they can still end up getting the girl. If they're, because, you know, drugs, you know, selling drugs and killing people and crime is not cool. But if you look cool enough doing it, then perhaps you might still end up with someone in your arms at the end of the night.
Well, there's a lot of that in the rap culture, right? These guys, they have their bitches, you know, the young girls who are impressed with the money and the notoriety. I mean, who wouldn't want to live a fat life, right? So these criminals have a fat life. These girls have elected. They could have been like in Stand and Deliver, right? And gone to math class and, you know, got an advanced degree in calculus. but instead they decided to be, you know, somebody's hoe. And that's not good. Yeah. And then in this movie, it was an exploration of that. The club betrayed the club founder, right? The club got out of control.
Yeah.
And it betrayed him. Benny could not remain true to himself.
Yeah.
So we talked about this in Lion in Winter, the natural law, right? He wanted to be a loner. He didn't want anybody to ask anything of him, and he didn't want to be to do anything for anybody. He wanted to be alone. But at the end, a human being can't do that. And his attempt at that kind of stoicism crumbled. He fell apart. He came back to Kathy.
I got this real sense from Johnny. Now, Johnny is an interesting character a bit, in the sense that if you view him through the lens of he's simply doing what he thinks looks cool, or he's doing what he thinks
he's
cool.
The founder of the club.
Yeah, Johnny is the founder of the club. However, his idea for founding the club was that he was watching The Wild Ones and he saw Marlon Brando's character.
Hiya, sweetheart. Hey, what are you doing in this miserable gully, Johnny, my love?
And he's an outsider himself. He feels that he's an outsider. You know, he's on the fringes of society, you know, and he's got a bunch of other friends who are sort of misfits. And, you know, you want a sense of belonging, but you also don't want a sense of that, you know, you're not someone worth looking at. And he sees this movie with Marlon Brando, who is playing a character on the fringe of society, and the movies make him look cool. And you get this sense that throughout the movie, Johnny just wants him and his group of friends to have this, you know, unified culture.
Yeah, a very small, controllable group.
Yeah, exactly. He just wants to hang out with his friends and ride bikes and live a life that is not just satisfying to him and his friends, but also one that makes them feel cool, because everyone has that sense of they want to belong, but they also don't want to look like losers.
So the whole thing about wearing the patch is you're elite.
Yeah.
So you're elite. You know, in American Graffiti, they have the guy who's the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Right? He says, I know everybody in town secretly wants to be one of the Pharaohs. And there was like 3 guys but they did that. Now, Johnny, he kind of sacrificed his family in a big way for this too, right?
Yeah.
He could have been spending time with his family.
He had a wife. He had
wife and children.
He had wife and children. I was very surprised at the end of the movie when he said he had, like, I think a kid or 3. I wasn't sure, but it was very surprising because he never spends any time with them. You see one shot when he was at home watching Wild Ones and his wife is there, but
yeah. So he had his own pathology, and he was a trucker. He was a long distance trucker, and at that time, like I said, they were taking amphetamines. Not all of them, obviously, but there was such a thing. You know, it was part of the culture, the trucker culture then. And the trucker culture and the bike, they're road warriors, right? They're kind of out there side by side. So a lot of truckers are bikers, a lot of bikers are truckers, that kind of thing.
What's really interesting to me is that the story of Johnny sort of reminds me of a sort of bigger issue that we're having here in the United States, which is that there's a big loneliness epidemic for young men, and that there's a big sort of disillusionment with how men fit into society now. And
that's because of the demasculinization. So what happened? It's a shame what happened, really. And I have a friend who's a genius with this. I have a friend who, she loves the exalted man. She loves the man who's the gladiator, the killer, the guy, his own hero, some incredibly monolithic master, a king, And then the way she feels about women is exactly the same. She wants the monolithic woman, the Madonna, the goddess, the woman with the house and the children and control everything. And she lives for that man, and that man lives for her, And this is how she sees like the relationship of men and women. And that's the best way to be, right? You're your own hero. You're the king. You're going to go out and conquer the world when you leave the house in the morning. And you're doing it for that goddess that's waiting at home. And not waiting. She's living her life, but she knows that she is the prize, and he knows that he's the prize. And together they're thrilled to have each other that way. That's the way you want to be, right? You don't want to live with a loser. You don't want to be a loser. You want to be the greatest guy married to the greatest woman. And that's the way she sees men and women, what they should be. Now, what happened was women came along. And I don't know if women did this or men. I think that men exploited women by doing this. They put them in the workforce, right? They wanted, it's the greatest thing having women workers because they're already housed and they're already fed, and now they can actually do mechanical labor on an assembly line somewhere. So feminism, put women in the workforce. I don't know that that's the way women want to live their life. I think women want to raise children and they want to have a community. And I think they have a different work cycle. I don't think that they're ready to just wake up in the morning and go right out and work. The problem was that some liberals came along and they said, not only do women have to be capable of doing anything a man can do, which is ridiculous, but men have to be capable of doing everything a woman can do. So men had to become feminized. And men all of a sudden, instead of being the gladiator, they had to be the child caretaker and everything. And men are natural protectors, but they are not nursing a baby. They don't have what they call the tender years. During the tender years, the woman is supposed to take care of the baby and the man is supposed to support that. That's a natural way things should be. But they decided to have an unnatural lifestyle, and they made women go to work in factories, and they had men, carrying the baby around in a backpack and whatever it may be. So in the demasculinization of men, it made men hard to find their identity. Now, not every man wants to be the winner of a bar fight. There are guys who are small in stature. I'm not a big guy. I can't take on these. I got friends that are huge Samoans. I'm like 1/3 their size. So I'm never going to be that kind of fighter, but intellectually, I can still conquer the world, right? And man is not a nails and claws animal. We're thinkers. That's our thing. So to take the man and to take away his natural desire to be a conqueror, it does make men question their role. It does make them wonder what their role is. It used to be pretty simple when I was growing up. You were going to get the best education you could get, and whether it was with your hands or your mind, you were going to go to the limit of your capability. But now there's a sidetrack, and you have to attempt to be something you're not. And women have to attempt to be something they're not. So feminism defeminized women, and it demasculinized men, and it was a bad idea then, and it's still a bad idea now.
Well, more specifically, what I'm talking about is specifically what it is with men, is that because you can see it happen with Johnny in the movie ironically, just as much as you can see it happen now, Johnny looks towards Marlon Brando and the Wild Ones. He looks towards Marlon Brando not only as like something that's cool and something to idolize, but then he begins to see Marlon Brando's character as a role model, and then he begins to model his life after what he thinks is both masculine and cool, because he is a misfit, he is an outsider, and he begins to help his friends model their lives much in the same way. And you see that a lot in the same way, because there's that whole, I'm not
and
sure.
Wasn't Marlon Brando's character named Johnny also?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
But
What are you rebelling against, Johnny? Right. That's when he gives the classic line, "What do you got?"
But I'm not sure how much you know about the modern words and culture like that. But you have the whole Sigma culture. I'm not sure if you know what that is.
I've heard about it.
And you have
Sigma
a lot,
male.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You have these men who want to be more than what they are, and society doesn't necessarily allow for that, or they don't feel that society has helped them to utilize what they have to offer. And so you have all these guys who are watching these movies. Like, a lot of big examples that are used in Sigma culture is you have Brad Pitt's character from Fight Club, or you even have sometimes even Patrick Bateman's character from American Psycho, or a lot of these outsiders who decide to go against society, suppressing them from using their masculine traits, and then they rebel out in a violent way. But the movies that they're portrayed in romanticize that. And so you have Johnny's character, who's much in the same way, is that's what a real man looks like, that's what a real man does. But when you are basing sort of your role model off of just the romanticization that you see in a movie, you have no foundation. And you begin to see that crack with Johnny.
Great point.
He's trying to keep his group of friends together. He's trying to you get the sense that Johnny doesn't really know what he's really doing or managing. He's making it up as he goes. He's doing what makes him look manly, what makes him feel like he belongs, which helps him feel like he's got a unified group. But as the group begins to splinter, you begin to see the cracks sort of crack away at Johnny, and more you begin to see that this calm, cool guy who seems like he had it all collected in the beginning begins to slip.
Yeah.
And I will spoil, I'm going to make a spoiler now, so if you do not want to get a huge spoiler, but when Johnny dies at the end of the movie,
right,
his facial expression is dumbfounded. I thought it was a very peculiar facial expression to make, but it was when he died, because he thought he
couldn't believe it would end that way.
Exactly, because he thought he had it all figured out. He was like a cool guy, would fight with knives and brass knuckles. Mm-hmm. But the other guy is just thinking, I want to win, so he kills him, he shoots him. Right. And Johnny's like,
yeah, very pragmatic. It reminded me of the Indiana Jones movie, right? The guy with the sword, he's got the sword, and Indiana Jones just shoots him in the chest.
Exactly. And Johnny, it's in that moment, Johnny's just so surprised that it's his facade slips, and he has that extraordinarily dumbfounded, sort of surprised, completely caught off guard expression on his face, Right.
That ending was not one of the check boxes.
No, it was
could
not.
Be, I could knife you, you could knife me, we could end up fist fighting, but being shot was not on the list for that night.
And so you get the sense that Johnny
he's betrayed, isn't he?
Yeah, he just wanted to belong. He felt like an outsider, but not only did he want to belong, but he wanted to feel as if he was, like you said, cool and elite. So you put a bunch of you're an outsider. You like motorcycles. You put you and a bunch of your friends together on motorcycles. You wear cool jackets to make it. Hey, we're not. They would call you, was it vandals? Which is based off outlaws.
Right.
They're like, hey, you think we're vandals? Maybe instead of that being a bad word, we're going to use it as if it's a cool thing. We are vandals. We're the vandals,
Yeah, but he really did escalate that when they burned down the bar.
Yeah.
What about the bar? Burn it down.
When the guys beat up Benny, and then he came back with the group and burned down the bar, he said, no one will come and stop us. They fear us.
Yeah.
So he felt a lot of strength and power there.
Yeah, but he had no foundation.
But what does power do? Power attracts.
Yeah.
Right, it attracts. And now all these guys coming back from Vietnam who have PTSD, and they were just the way the original bikers did from World War from World War II and the Korean conflict. Now you got guys coming from back Vietnam, and these are drugged guys. These are guys with a different different music, let's say. And then now they want to run it.
So essentially Johnny's character to me was just one guy who felt like a misfit, an outcast. He puts together a group of friends and then does what he thinks is cool, does what he thinks will, make them feel like above society instead of at the
That's
bottom
right.
rungs of it.
Yep.
And then, but when you do that and you're just sort of fronting, sort of pretending, and you have no foundation, then when you have that sort of element where it challenges your leadership, it begins to crumble, begins to crack, and then the fall.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you are stressing this at the moment. It's obviously an element of tribalism.
Yeah.
Right? Our tribe. We have our identifying feature. And this is how it is all through America now. You have, like the Christians, the Jews, the LGBT community, the black community, the Hispanic community. These are all tribes. And they have an elitist. They have an identifying thing, right? You see people like, you'll pull up next to a car with a boom, boom, boom in the stereo, like blasting the windows right out of the car. That's a mating, tribalistic mating call, right? I'm me. This is me. This is what I do.
Fronting.
Yeah. So the tribalism is another problem. Now, with me, as you well know, I have a love for individuals. Mm-hmm. I don't like tribes. I don't think they're productive. I think it's something that separates people. I just like everybody to be judged independently as an individual, and I think it would be a happier world that way. I don't want to identify your tribe. I don't kiss me, I'm Irish, or, I'm a Sicilian, my name is Satilli, right? Yeah. So it's like, you don't see me doing the Italian thing, like a big Guido or something. I don't like that. I don't want that. I'm a real Ayn Rand style individualist. Everybody's their own hero. Everybody should be judged by their merits. I don't care what your tribe is. It's not attractive to me or detractive. If you tell me you're whatever you, like I'm a biker, right? I probably went 800,000 miles on these Harleys in my life. Do I look like some kind of tribalistic biker? Not at all, right? Got more miles than most of them. The guys with the dingle dangles and all the stuff, and the ink and the beard tassels, and whatever it may be. Yeah. A lot of those guys are like weekend warriors. Like you see that guy on the weekend and like, wow, he's got all this equipment and everything. In the meantime, he just works at the bank during the week. Yeah. Just kind of cuts it all back. And
that was one of the things that like Fight Club touched on. Like, I know I'm talking a lot, but like, it's like you have a bunch of these men who want to belong, and they want to belong, but they also don't want to, belong to a society where it put them on the bottom rungs and made them feel like they don't belong. But they're also not they're also not strong enough to stand on their own. And I think what Kathy character said is like they're like rats. It's like when they're alone, they're afraid, but once they're together, then they're brave and strong.
That's right.
It's like that's the
strength
issue.
And unity. That's not strength and diversity. Everybody told you their strength and diversity is stupid.
That's the issue. There is like when you have a bunch of men who are unable to find the strength to be men on their own, they look to these examples.
Tribes.
They look to tribes.
Join a tribe.
They look to these examples that they see on TV and stuff like that and think, if that's what a man is like, then I will think like him, I'll act like him, I'll dress like him. But then, if you're just pretending you lack that foundation, then you begin to slip and you begin to fall. And you have that problem for a lot of men today. And it's funny that back then in the 1960s, through Johnny's character, it's like the problem back then is still very much the same as now.
It's true. You know what the truth is about these tribes? Mostly they eat their own. Mafia is killed by other mafia. And there's nothing worse than being outcast from your tribe. Yeah. So you become whatever it is, and then the tribe, they don't like something that you do, and then they cast you out, and then you're powerless again. So tribes do eat their own, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to be hurt by somebody like you than a total stranger.
I feel like it is it's a very American movie, because America is very like, yes, there are very definite hallmarks of American culture. You have, the booming industrialism, you have the pop culture and all of that. But very much America is also very famous for our sort of appraisal or embracing of, the fringes of our culture. You have lots of movies about cowboys and stuff like that. Like, they were very much on the fringes of society. They were the outsiders, and literally Outlaws comes from that era.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that Kevin Costner movie that's coming out right now. That's
extremely excited for that. But and then you also have like this movie's about bikers, lots of movies about gangsters, lots of movies about sort of rock and roll. like a big part of America's culture and history and sort of identity is within its popular culture, but there's also the other half of America's identity is our fringe cultures, which we also embrace just as much, which is kind of ironic that it's fringe and yet we sort of embrace it still.
Right.
And
It's
praise
mainstream fringe.
It's mainstream fringe, right?
Right.
And
We used to call it a hippie convention.
yeah.
Right, like conventional hippie.
Yeah.
The hippie was supposed to be unconventional, but they all look the same, so they had a hippie convention, you know.
Yeah, so this movie does a very good job of sort of showing you. I feel like this movie does a very good job of romanticizing the, the early biker culture in America, and as well as letting you have a sneak peek on what it's like to be on the fringes of the outside of American society. That it's just as cool as being on the inside, but also that when you're on the fringes, and that you begin to see what the issues are, why they're on the fringes to begin with.
Right.
That's why I felt like the movie wasn't so much a character study, wasn't so much about the story, because the story is very cut and dry. It's very, like I said, it's like a very stereotypical mafia movie. It's been done before, and the characters are not the most interesting, but you see the most out of the movie when you see how they operate within a culture or within a sort of historical picture of, how the movie is portraying bikers and biker culture to you.
Yeah. There were cultures and subcultures.
And jumping off of that point, like I kind of want to talk about some of the actor performances. I was not amazed by Austin Butler. I know he's like very popular right now, but he spends a good majority of the movie just being very brooding, and I think he has like 13 lines in this movie.
I'm Benny.
It's true. He didn't say a lot, did he?
He's very moody. He's very brooding, and I know that he's supposed to stand. My girlfriend pointed out he's just supposed to stand there and look pretty, and that's okay. But I mean, it's like, is that really what people want to go to a movie theater for? To just watch a character just stand there and look pretty?
I'm not that kind of girl.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't dig it when people don't shave.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's a thing now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got like 2 days of growth or something like that.
Yeah.
I just think it's like no time to shave this morning, like kind of messy. But girls do like that. They want to see some scruff. There's some that do.
Yeah.
You know, it's strange to me that it's a style.
It was kind of unfortunate for him to be more of just like sort of a stereotype, or just to be sort of someone to fawn over, kind of almost like Boys in the Boat, the main character, who also said virtually nothing in that movie,
Right.
and was also
Yeah.
just very stoic. But then I thought Kathy's character was perhaps the most interesting, but she is very much like plays the mafia wife a little bit. And
She's in total denial. She's in total denial.
My
The
girlfriend
reality
agrees
of
with
her
that.
life is, you know,
Johnny's character to me was the most interesting, because he could be written off very much as, oh, he's just the tough guy leader of the group, but he has more layers when you look at him as someone who, and you can kind of see it as someone who doesn't really know what he's doing. He's just making it up as he goes, and then as it falls apart, you begin to see him splinter.
Well, you said it real well in the
Yeah.
beginning of this thing. There was no foundation to what he wanted to do. So he was playing it by ear.
Yeah.
He was just fast and loose.
And, when you...
It's supposed to be. It's a bike gang.
Eventually, it catches up with you, though,
Right. Yeah.
And so Tom Hardy's performance was not... It's effective. I would say he did a good job. It's an effective job. Did he make Johnny as interesting as he could be? I don't think so. I'm not sure if that's on the writing, or I'm not sure if that's on Tom Hardy's performance, but he did a good job. I just wish with the what I have seen from Tom Hardy that I could have seen more from him,
Yeah. I thought the actors did a good job doing their job.
Yeah, I thought the exact same. Everyone did a good job at doing exactly what they're supposed to. That makes it mediocre, though,
Yeah. Well, that takes me right back to the very beginning of this, the bike exploitation. It's like you see these signs on the highway. It's like a lawyer went to law school and he decided, I'm going to take care of motorcycle wreck accident guys. And then he's got his billboard, right?
Yeah.
So it's a specialized, like he's going to exploit that group.
Yeah.
And I felt with this movie, it was bike exploitation.
It very much
Like-
was just a romanticization of a certain.
I mean,
part of
I'm
American
a Harley
culture.
rider. I went to see it. I want to see these guys. They're riding bikes that I actually had. This was not a biker movie. It was not a motorcycle movie.
It's fun. I won't lie. It is fun because if you
It's a cool backdrop.
It's kind of like if you wanted to see a cowboy movie without really touching on any deeper themes. Like if you want to see a cowboy movie for the sake of just seeing,
Right, with no horses in it.
if you wanted to see guns, dusters,
Right.
Mexican standoffs and stuff like that, without really getting any really deeper than that, maybe a couple horses, then this movie will be very enjoyable to you to just appreciate for the bikes, for, the general picture of, that aesthetic and that sort of vibe. But underneath that surface, I feel like there's deeper themes there that's way more interesting that is just not explored. And it's not really that super interesting. It's a fun watch. It's not interesting.
I think I'm gonna go back and watch on Any Sunday. Have you ever heard of On Any Sunday?
No.
That's a motorcycle movie, right? It's the really motorcycling in Southern California. It's On Any Sunday. All these things are happening,
Yeah.
right? All the motorcycle, desert racing and stuff. I think I'm gonna review that again. I think I'm gonna go back and I haven't seen it for many years. It's quintessential. It's a good one.
Like I said, it's very enjoyable for what it is. If you like, I know that you have your opinions about the motorcycles, but if you like seeing guys on bikes in leather jackets, riding down the highway, being wild, and then, nothing really more than that, with, a somewhat sort of almost interesting crime, sort of corruption plot there, then yeah, go see this movie. It's fun. I think I found it enjoyable. It was a fun watch just to see the aesthetic, the vibes. Like I said, I was super in love with all the patches and the outfits that they were wearing. However, the character studies wasn't so much. I felt perhaps maybe it was a bit, too spread out, too thin. There's the plot line, like you said, felt a little generic, and there were deeper themes that I thought were interesting. Some were sort of relevant that I thought would have been nice to have been explored, but just weren't. So enjoyable movie, must watch, not really, but fun nonetheless. So I give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. Oh, we are so in tune with that. That's the number that I was going to say. I didn't appreciate the bike exploitation. I'm going to say the same thing. I give it a 6.
All right. Thank you for watching The Real Generation Gap. Make sure to come join us again. And, let us know what you thought down in the comments. Did you think that perhaps this had some sort of relevance to a lot of the cultural issues that we have today? Or do you think that I'm really just speaking out of my butt? Make sure to let us know down in the comments. And make sure to join us next time. Thank you very much.